And we're back. Welcome back to the channel. Today it is time to cover every single match taking place this week in the Europa League. There are 2 matches taking place tomorrow on Wednesday afternoon, followed by 16 matches taking place across Thursday afternoon and Thursday evening. If you want to know my predictions for today's Champions League fixtures and tomorrow's Champions League fixtures, we did all 18 of those matches in yesterday's video. Link to that will be available at the top of your screen. And don't forget that if you subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on, then tomorrow morning at this exact time, you will then get all 18 of my predictions for the Europa Conference League, of which all 18 matches this week will be taking place on Thursday. So please do consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the predictions we've got coming up for you this week. You'll have at least 24 hours notice on what I think is going to happen over the course of this week. And don't forget to drop a like on any of the videos that you are watching, especially this one if you are here right now. In terms of today though, as we've already mentioned, we're talking about all 18 Europa League matches, and I've split it up as always across 2 separate pages. The first page that you can see here is going to be covering the 2 matches taking place tomorrow and then the 7 early kickoffs on Thursday. Then the second page will cover all 9 fixtures taking place on the later kickoff time on Thursday evening. So far in this Europa League, we have got 19 out of 36 correct results and 1 correct score. So we're not doing as well as we've been doing in the Champions League, but I do think there are some slightly easier ones to call in the Europa League this week. We will see. That is the fun of this series. But without any further ado, let's just get straight into it. The first of those early kickoffs tomorrow sees Sporting Braga of Portugal taking on Bodo Glimt. And Braga so far, 1 win, 1 loss. But on matchday 2, 3-0 defeat to Olympiacos. For Bodo Glimt, it was a draw with Union Saint-Gilloise in matchday 2. But most crucially, on matchday 1, they were able to beat the Portuguese side in Porto. And what's even more fascinating is that off the back of the Olympiacos defeat for Braga, they then played Porto in the Portuguese league and lost. So, little bit of momentum, I would say, favouring Bodo Glimt in this one. I think a lot of people are going to be expecting Braga to get the result. Certainly when you consider that Bodo Glimt have potentially 11 first-team squad players out for this one. They had 2 players go off at the weekend after already having 9 players out injured. So they are struggling a little bit for fitness at the moment. The expectation is some, if not all, could actually be available for this game. But I just think, like I say, Braga not playing the best football at the moment. Bodo Glimt have already got a big result against the Portuguese side, arguably a better Portuguese side in Porto, and Braga have already lost to Porto in the last few weeks as well. So with all of that said, I'm going to balance it out with a 1-1 draw. Like I said, I think the expectation would still be for Braga to get the result, but I think Bodo Glimt have done enough to get themselves a 1-1 draw in this game from what I've seen from them so far. But as always, we shall see. The other early kickoff on Wednesday in the Europa League sees Galatasaray taking on Elfsborg. Galatasaray 4 points from their first 2 games. Elfsborg 3 points. But on matchday 2, Galatasaray were only able to manage a 0-0 draw against RFS of Latvia. Meanwhile, Elfsborg were beating Serie A giants Roma. And let's not forget, put up a hell of a good fight against AZ Alkmaar as well. And only a 3-2 defeat on matchday 1. The only issue is, going into this game, Elfsborg then lost both matches since in the Swedish league, whereas Galatasaray have continued to dominate in the Turkish league. So, given all of that, given that on paper Galatasaray are a very, very strong side, I am going to give them the win. I'm going to go for 3-1. Don't write out for Elfsborg though. They are a strong side on their day. It's just not been a good couple of weeks for them domestically. That then takes us straight through to Thursday, and like I say, starting with the earlier kickoffs, the 7:30 kickoffs, 17:30, the 5:30 kickoffs on Thursday. And the first of those games, it sees Eintracht Frankfurt of Germany taking on the aforementioned RFS of Latvia. Obviously drawing with Galatasaray last time out. Meanwhile, Frankfurt won 3-1 away at Besiktas, but that was off the back of a rather surprising 3-3 draw at home to Victoria Pilsen. But, speaking of 3-3 draws, Frankfurt backed up their result against Besiktas by drawing 3-3 with Bayern Munich and then very narrowly losing 2-1 to Bayer Leverkusen at the weekend. So, realistically, on paper, Frankfurt definitely have to be considered the stronger side here. Yes, RFS got a great result last time out, but considering Eintracht Frankfurt are going toe-to-toe with the likes of Bayern and Bayer Leverkusen in the Bundesliga at the moment, I can only realistically sit here and say that this is going to be a Frankfurt win. I'm going to go for 4-0. RFS defensively in Europe so far this season in the playoff rounds have been taking a few hammerings, and I can definitely see another one here, and I'm going for 4-0 to Frankfurt. Next up, it is Midtjylland taking on Union Saint-Gilloise. Both of these teams not in very good form in all competitions at the moment. Midtjylland were able to get the win over Maccabi Haifa in Matchday 2, but have lost both of their matches domestically since. Union have drawn all of their last 3 matches, including the Matchday 2 game against Bodo Glimt, which we mentioned earlier. Neither of these sides have any real fresh injury concerns. Both sides do have injuries in the squad, but none that we didn't talk about in the previous video. So we're sort of going into this with a sort of level sort of balance. Honestly, this is the sort of classic fixture where I look at it and go 2-1 to the home team, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go 2-1 to Midtjylland. Definitely could see all 3 results available here, but with Midtjylland being the home side, they are the most likely to win. Next up, it's Ferencváros taking on Nice. And this is another pair of teams that aren't necessarily playing particularly great. Ferencváros have lost both of their matches so far in the Europa League, both by margins of 2-1 versus Anderlecht and versus Spurs. Nice, on the other hand, have not won a single game in their last 5, but have drawn 4 of them, and those draws have come against the likes of PSG in the domestic league and Real Sociedad and Lazio in the Europa League. So results may not necessarily suggest how well Nice are playing. They're another side that have huge injury concerns, Nice. A lot of their first team players are out injured. The most notable, of course, is Moffi up front, who is going to be missing for the vast majority of this season. For me, again, I think Ferencváros are pushing the boundaries at the moment. They're playing well. Nice just can't buy a win at the moment, so I have to go for another 1-1 draw. I can't really suggest one team to take it either way. If I'm going to back a side here, it would be Nice, but I'm just not confident enough given the fact that they haven't won a single game in their last 5. Next up, it's Maccabi Tel Aviv taking on Real Sociedad. This game is going to be played in Serbia due to all of the other ongoing issues at the moment. Maccabi are on 0 points so far in this competition, losing to Braga and to Midtjylland. Sociedad are on a very good form domestically. They were able to draw with Atletico Madrid a couple of weeks ago and then won away at Girona at the weekend, but somehow are only on 1 point in this competition because they drew with Nice last time and then lost to Anderlecht at home. So very, very bizarre sort of second circumstances for Real Sociedad. However, given how poor Maccabi have been so far in this competition and how good Real Sociedad have been in La Liga over the last few weeks, I can only realistically go for a Sociedad win here, and I'm going to go for 2-0 to Real Sociedad in this one. That then brings us to PAOK and Victoria Pilsen. PAOK have lost both of their opening matches so far in this Europa League, going down to Galatasaray and then losing at home to FCSB. Victoria Pilsen got that 3-3 draw against Frankfurt that we mentioned earlier, but then unfortunately for them, backed it up with a 0-0 draw against Ludogorets. So again, this fixture is absolutely horrid. Again, neither of these sides with any sort of fresh injury concerns or suspensions to worry about. So we're looking at both sides playing their strongest available sides in this competition. I have to think that at home, you have to favour PAOK in this one. But don't forget, I just said that PAOK did lose at home to FCSB in the last round. And Pilsen defensively do tend to play very well and tend to rise up to the opponents that they're playing against, like the 3-3 draw against Frankfurt. However, again, I just think PAOK at home should be edging this. So I'm going to go for 1-0 to PAOK on this one. But honestly, err on the side of caution on this one. This is a horrible one to call. Next up, in theory, should be an easier one to call. It's Karabag taking on Ajax. Karabag are currently 34th out of 36 in the table, losing to Spurs and also losing to Malmo. Ajax are 6th with wins over Besiktas and a draw with Slavia Prague. In that game against Slavia, Yuri Bas got himself suspended after a red card. Karabag did bounce back from poor performances in this competition with a 5-0 win at the weekend. Meanwhile, Ajax were winning 4-3 in the Eredivisie. So the one thing you would expect from this game is goals. I would thoroughly expect Ajax to win this. Defensively in this competition so far, Karabag have been absolutely shambolic. So I'm going to go for 4-2 to Ajax. Could be a really fun one, this. Definitely think Karabag could produce something. But like I said, I do expect Ajax to take this one pretty comfortably. It just could be a very, very fun game. And then finally, for the earlier kickoffs on Thursday, we end things with Roma taking on Dinamo. And unfortunately, again, for Dinamo, this time, they are the team sitting in 35th. We just talked about Karabag in 34th. Well, Dinamo Kiev are currently on 36 with 0 points and no goals scored in the Europa League so far. That said, Roma aren't playing particularly well at the moment either. They're on 1 point after they drew with Bilbao in the opening game of the competition. And then, as we already mentioned, lost to Elfsborg 1-0 in Matchday 2. Not only that, they are 10th in Serie A at the moment and just lost to Inter Milan, whereas Dinamo do continue to lead the Ukrainian league at the moment. So, it's not out of the question that Dinamo Kiev could get something from this game purely because Roma are playing so poor. However, I do still think it would be a bigger upset than any of the other upsets I've gone for so far today. So I am still going to go with Roma, but I'm only going to go for 2-0. They've only got 8 goals in Serie A so far this season as well, so they're not scoring well. They do tend to leak goals, but I just think on paper, Roma have to be stronger than Dinamo Kiev. But watch this space. Dinamo more than capable of producing something if they turn up. That rounds up all of the early kickoffs taking place both on Wednesday and on Thursday. To take one last final look, once again I'll put the markers down on the the timeline with the chapters, so you can jump back and forth from this moment if you do want to have another look at the earlier predictions. But it is now time to talk about the 9 games taking place at 8 o'clock. I believe the kickoffs are, it might be 7:45, I can't honestly remember, but the later kickoffs taking place on Thursday, and the first of those is between Anderlecht and Ludogorets. For Anderlecht, it is 2 wins out of 2, both fixtures being a 2-1 victory at home to Ferencváros, but then most impressively 2-1 away to Real Sociedad. Ludogorets were losers at home to Slavia Prague, but then got what I think is quite an impressive draw, 0-0 away to Victoria Pilsen. In terms of injuries and suspensions for this one, Anderlecht have had issues, but a lot of their players are starting to come back. Some are suggesting that Jan Vertonghen could also make his way back into the side for this one, but it may be a little bit too soon for them. The only real surprise going into this is that despite how good Anderlecht have been in this competition, they've not been at their best domestically and lost again this weekend at 2-1 in a fixture that most would expect them to win. So, again, watch this space, but I would expect Anderlecht to get the result in this one. I'm going for 2-0 to the Belgian side in this one. Next up, Athletic Bilbao taking on Slavia Prague. Now, both of these sides currently sit on 4 points in the Europa League. Bilbao with the draw with Roma, then comfortably beating AZ Alkmaar. For Slavia Prague, as we just mentioned, it was victory for them over Ludogorets, and also they drew with Ajax. So both teams have had good records so far against the Dutch sides. Not only that, as we mentioned in yesterday's video, Slavia Prague beat Sparta Prague in the Prague derby a couple of weeks ago as well. And as I mentioned in that video, I think these sides from Prague, Slavia and Sparta, are playing very good football at the moment and cannot be underestimated. Going into this, they do have Dorley suspended and do have several injury concerns, but what's really bizarre is that when I checked all of this out in terms of the injuries, all of the Slavia players were listed as either doubtful or returning this week. So even though they had like 7 or 8 players listed as out, all of them could actually play. But obviously it's a massive risk when you do that. For Bilbao, the only real significant absentee is still likely to be Unai Simon, the goalkeeper. He's been missing for a long while. But again, could be a really, really tight one this. Slavia Prague, very worth the value they've got of their 4 points so far. But Bilbao at home, with the quality they have, with the Williams brothers, I'm going to go for 2-1 to them. But genuinely, Slavia could produce a result there. Next up, it is Porto taking on Hoffenheim, a Portuguese side taking on a German side. For said Bundesliga side, Grealish, Bibu, Kadak and Kaderabak all out injured who would be considered first team players. And on top of that, Porto are really not necessarily looking like they've got any significant first team injuries. Going into it though, Hoffenheim are on 4 points in this group and Porto are only on 1 after losing to Bodo Glimt and then drawing to Manchester United, even though Manchester United had 10 men. Hoffenheim are starting to work their way back up the Bundesliga table. If you remember last time, going into Matchday 3, we were talking about Hoffenheim teetering on the brink of the relegation zone. They are now back up to 14th and are starting to pick up results in the Bundesliga as well. And I've got a striker in Butler who is starting to score goals every single week. But, speaking of strikers, Porto, of course, have Omarodian, who is absolutely flying up front for them. So, could be an interesting one. I expect it to be a relatively high-scoring one. Just sort of depends how it all balances out in the end. With Porto at home, I'd be surprised if they didn't get the result. So, I'm going for a 3-2 victory for them. Next up, it is FC Twente taking on Lazio. Both games so far for FC Twente have been draws. 1-1 against Manchester United and then 1-0 against Fenerbahce. However, for Lazio, they have won both of their games so far. 3-0 victory over Dinamo Kiev and a 4-1 victory over Nice, which sees them currently first out of 36 in this Europa League. At the weekend, they lost 1-0 to Juventus. Meanwhile, FC Twente were only able to pick up a draw in the Eredivisie. For me, Lazio go into this as the much stronger side with the much better momentum. Yes, they did lose at the weekend, but Juventus are playing very, very good football at the moment in Serie A. So I don't think it's too bad a result for them to lose only 1-0. So it's Lazio I'm going for again to extend their lead at the top of the table. I am going to go for 3-1 to the Serie A side. That then brings us to the game that I really can't talk about without being incredibly biased. For those of you that are new here, I am a Manchester United fan, and there are so many factors going into this game without even talking about the match. Jose Mourinho in charge of Fenerbahce, the former Manchester United manager, the man who delivered more trophies in one season than any other manager has since the departure of Sir Alex Ferguson. Their midfield partnership is Fred and Amrabat. Two midfielders that our current manager deemed not good enough to take Manchester United forward, not to mention that their star striker is Edin Dzeko, formerly of the old enemy Manchester City. For Manchester United, they of course have Bruno Fernandes suspended to this one after his red card on Matchday 2 and still have the injuries that we spoke about at the weekend. But there shouldn't be any fresh injuries for Manchester United going into this. And Lenny Yoro is also back in individual training. So what do I think is going to happen in the match itself? I honestly think this is a very, very hard one to call. United obviously drawing their first two matches in this competition to FC Twente and to Porto. For Fenerbahce, it was victory over Union Saint-Gilloise and then the draw with Twente themselves. So both of these sides have drawn 1-1 with FC Twente so far in this competition. So I look at this game, and like I say, it's impossible for me to remain impartial given all of the outside factors going into this. If I'm going to give you my honest prediction purely based on the numbers that have come out so far, the only prediction I can give is another 1-1 draw. Both sides drew 1-1 with Twente, United drawing with Porto, Fenerbahce playing okay at the moment. But as a United fan, off the back of the Brentford game, I expect Manchester United to win this, and I expect us to make a statement against our former manager and our former players. But I'm not confident enough to go for the United win yet, which is why I'm going for the 1-1 draw. Hopefully I end up being wrong. That then brings us to Lyon taking on Besiktas in a game which sees the second side in the Europa League on goal difference. Lyon behind Lazio, I think, by 1 goal difference. Taking on the side that sits absolutely rock bottom of the Europa League in Besiktas, which I think would surprise a few, given that how good Besiktas normally are in the Turkish league. But they're another side that have first-team players out injured. Al Mazrati, Gabriel Palista, and Rashika, to name a few. But so far, they lost 4-0 to Ajax and then 3-1 at home to Frankfurt. Meanwhile, both in this competition and domestically, Lyon have now won 5 games in a row, including both the results on match days 1 and 2 so far. So, given that, there's only realistically one result I can go for here, and that is Lyon to get the win, to continue their good run of form, and to continue Besiktas's bad run of form. So I'm going to go for 4-1. Besiktas are shipping goals for fun. Lyon, to be fair, including in Ligue 1 over the last few weeks, have been scoring goals for fun as well. So I just don't see there being any other result here. I think Lyon take it. I'm going for 4-1. Next up, it is Malmo taking on Olympiacos. For Malmo, 2 defeat out of 2. No, sorry. Look, got that one wrong. For both of these teams so far in the Europa League, they both lost on match day 1 and then both won on match day 2. Malmo are absolutely flying domestically, however, and I know we've spoken about Elfsborg a few times in this video already, but they're the other side from Sweden, and Malmo are currently 17 points ahead of Elfsborg in the Swedish league. So that sort of gives you some sort of perspective of how well Malmo are playing at the moment. For Olympiacos, they've had two draws since their victory over Braga in the Greek league, that sees them currently sit 4th in that Greek league. Neither of these sides come into this game with any injury concerns or suspensions. So, again, it just makes it a really, really hard one to call. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Olympiacos because I just think on paper they are the stronger side. I think they've had better results so far in this Europa League competition so far, just given the calibre of sides these two sides have played. I just think the win for Olympiacos is a more impressive win than the win for Malmo. And Olympiacos' defeat was against tougher opposition than what Malmo's defeat was. So I'm going to go for 2-1 Olympiacos, but watch this space. This is definitely one that could go either way. Penultimate game sees Rangers taking on FCSB. Rangers are 17th in this competition so far, with a good win away to Malmo on match day 1, but then getting absolutely smashed by Lyon on match day 2. For FCSB, it is 4th in the table for them, with 2 wins out of 2, a 4-1 victory over RFS, and then a very snatch and grab win over PAOK on match day 2, despite being absolutely dominated and only having 10 men after Alari was sent off midway through the second half. But that means that they can prove themselves on this stage. We went into that game saying how PAOK are good at home, and obviously FCSB came away with the result there. So I look at this game now, I look at the form of these two sides. Rangers lost to Kilmarnock at the weekend in the Scottish League, so that's another terrible result for them. Meanwhile, FCFB have won all of their last 5 matches, including, of course, those 2 matches in match day 1 and match day 2. I do think Rangers are a stronger side than the 2 sides FCFB have played so far, but I have to look at Rangers' form, I have to look at FCSB's form, and say right now, I'm not confident enough to say Rangers are actually going to win this game, so I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. If FCSB get the win for a 3rd time, they seriously need to be considered a strong side in this competition, because I would consider that to be 3 upsets out of 3 so far in this competition if they manage to get the win here. But I do think Rangers should still be considered the favourites for this one. But a 2-2 draw, I think, is about fair, given how well these 2 sides have been playing recently. And then finally, it is Tottenham Hotspur taking on AZ Alkmaar. For Spurs, this competition has been an absolute breeze so far. 2 wins out of 2 after basically playing reserve lineups in both matches against Karabakh and Ferencvaros. AZ Alkmaar narrowly beat Elfsborg on match day 1, but since have lost all 4 matches in the Dutch League and in match day 2 to Bilbao. They're another team that has significant injury concerns. They're travelling to Tottenham in this match. And realistically, again, I just think whatever side Spurs put out in this one, the expectation would be that Spurs get the result. They've also had a few players coming back from injury. So even if they do rotate players from the weekend's win over West Ham, they're still going to be a stronger lineup than what they've been on match days 1 and 2. So unfortunately, if you're an AZ Alkmaar fan, the only realistic result I can go for here is a 3-1 victory to Spurs to round off all of the predictions for today. So once again, as always, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to leave all of your thoughts on all of these games in the comment section below. Don't forget to check out today's Champions League video, and don't forget to check out tomorrow's Europa Conference League video. Thank you very much for watching and listening once again. I will see you tomorrow morning for those 18 Europa Conference League matches.